Hello and welcome to episode number 26 of Daily Update with Sridhar. Namaskar Sridhar ji and welcome to PGurus channel.
Namaskar and very good morning to you on this wonderful Sunday election day weekend. And looking forward to a good discussion.
So this special broadcast is a little bit longer than our usual 15-minute news capsule because we want to try and decipher all the various lawsuits that are in play and all the races, and each one we are going to spend a little bit of time so that viewers understand the process by which America selects its president. Each state has its own laws. The Secretary of State of that state announces the result, and that is considered like the official announcement. So we have a lot of small things. Each state has a slightly different take on in terms of what has happened. And to make sense of all this stuff, Sridhar Chityalaji is going to help us understand these things. Let's first start with the big numbers. The first one being the House races. In the House races, the Republicans have made some good gains. Sridharji, what is your take on the House races?
The House race is Republicans have put up a terrific show. They have currently +5 in terms of the number of seats that they have gained. They expected to gain few more, whether it is 10, 12 in total, will become clearer in the next few days. But the House majority will still sit with the Democrats. So Nancy Pelosi continues, albeit with lesser majority. So Kevin McCarthy, the House opposition minority leader from the Republican Party, came out and basically said, look, we have won more seats than that was anticipated. We have had more votes than what we collected last time. So to us, we can call it as a mini victory in our path towards regaining the House. On the contrary, the Democrats have said, we have defended our position and we have regained the House majority. Yes, there are some challenges, and we will be addressing them as we look ahead. And we today hold the presidential power, so we will be able to support the president and vice president in driving the policy and the agenda that we promised to our electorate.
So if I just give the total tally, it is 216 Democrats and 195 Republicans. The total is 438, which means that there are 27 still to be announced results. Remember, viewers, that if there is a contested presidential election in a particular state, it's more likely that even in the congressional races, there is a fair amount of grayness involved with that. So this is going to play itself out over a period of time. So the Democrats are far closer to getting to the majority because they just need 4 more. And Republicans have a long way to go. They'll have to win a lot of races, which I think appears unlikely. But the bottom line is that the Republicans have done better in the 2020 race for House. Now let's take a look at Senate. This is where things get really interesting. From what I know, Sridharji, and correct me if I'm wrong, right now there is clarity on 96 Senate seats, 48-48. There's an evenly divided Senate right now. 4 are in play. And can you please take it away and explain to us where these 4 races stand?
Well, I think on the Senate side, the Republicans have won 48. The Democrats have won 46. The 2 independents have won, so that makes it 96. The Alaska seat, Republicans are leading. It's only 50%. It could take some time before that election is formally announced. Fairly safe to assume that it would go down the Republican way. North Carolina, Tom Tillis is leading. There's still by about 1.7%, and there's 98% votes counted. So therefore, there's all possibility, unless there is some dramatic moves, all possibility that the North Carolina will be retained by the Republicans, which means they will get 49. If they hold on to Alaska, which is likely, they'll get 50. So that leaves us with 2 seats. The Georgia results was split, and they were within the margin of less than 1% by state rules. that there will be re-election in Georgia for those two senates, and I think it's the first week of January. Those re-elections will be held, and the Republicans will be campaigning very hard. The Democrats will be equally campaigning very hard to cut into the lead. If the Republicans win the two seats, then they will, their net loss will be one in the overall Senate races. And it's again equally good on the part of the Republicans to have held on and the Democrats to have put a terrific fight in the elections for the Senate. Senate is effectively the most important house next to the president in terms of many decisions get made and endorsed in the Senate. So holding the Senate is like holding the power in the U.S. government.
So, if I understand it correctly, a lot of things will have to go Democrat way for them to get this. They can get even parity perhaps, but here is where the clincher is. If there is a 50-50 divided Senate, then the vice president, which is going to be perhaps, whoever it is, let me not announce it. I'm not going to announce it. The vice president has the deciding vote. So that is also very important there. And we'll leave it at that. You will see the Alaska race and hopefully the North Carolina race called in the next couple of days, we expect. And then there will be only the two Georgia races, which will not be decided for another 2 months. So very, very interestingly poised Senate. Now let's come to the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is the US presidential election. Now, before we look at the lawsuits that the Trump campaign has put, we must also remember that there are many lawsuits that have been in play for the several months leading up to the elections. This has now become a common occurrence where you have lots of lawsuits here, there, everywhere. I don't know the status of some of those lawsuits, Democrats and Republicans alike. Now, the main one now is the state-by-state certification of elections. Remember I said the Secretary of State of that state has to certify it. So let us start looking at each one. Each one is a slightly different situation. So why don't we start with, let's say, Michigan. Let's start with Michigan, sir. Why don't we start looking at Michigan's status?
No, I think just before we transition,
Sure.
I just want to reaffirm House is now effectively under the control of the Democrats. So there's no uncertainty on the on that point, right? The House is now under Democrats. The only thing is we are waiting for the pending seats to be announced. Republicans cannot acquire majority in the House. The House is clear, is with the Democrats. Okay, Senate is the one where there can be even Stevens or whether they can even be Republicans having a clear majority or a tie possible, right? All three results are possible. So I just want to complete that and then move to the question that you have raised, which is Michigan.
Yeah.
Where do we stand with Michigan? When I look at the Michigan kind of the results, right? The Michigan results, the way I look at Michigan results is right now Michigan results is they have officially reported Vice President Biden to be the winner, right? When I look at the percentage is pretty close to 2%, 49.9% to 47.9%, and the difference of 50.6% to 47.9%. So almost the difference is 3%, and 146,123 seats is the net difference in favor of Vice President Joe Biden. When you look at the numbers, and we look at the last year's numbers, the last election is somewhere between 24 to 27,000. Now is roughly the number by which President Trump won, whereas today Biden is leading by 146,000 votes and 3 percentage points. So where is the issue? There seems to be issues, and this is one of the states which is going to go into litigation. Where is the issue? The issue is there has been an affidavit which says that some votes which received the postal ballots were allowed to be backdated, which came later. There was a software glitch in Michigan, which resulted in first votes being cast for Trump, and those votes being first votes being cast for Biden, then reversed and cast to Trump. So there seems to be underlying issues in Michigan. The the historical trend in the states of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, there's always has been some problems. The state officials are stating that they have no problems. Now, given 96%, 96 million votes came via postal ballots this time, the highest ever, and vast volume going across. Even I mean, this percentage of postal ballots to percentage of in-person ballots remaining consistent more or less on percentage basis across the various states. The Republicans are saying they've had problems. How can you say there's been no glitches? The example that you just pointed out. Then there's somebody who has filed an affidavit that things were asked to be done contravenous. So this is the basis for a recount that is being claimed by the Republican Party. This will be contested. This is one of the cases that is being filed by the Republican Party and will be taken up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and we will know the outcome of that.
So that is Michigan for you. Let's now take a look at Nevada, sir. What is happening in Nevada?
Well, just before I forget, in Michigan, I think there's also this morning's news that there is an FBI investigation for some fraudulent activity in Detroit. I don't know the details, but there's apparently some activity has been triggered. Fox News is reporting that Solomon reporting the incident. Okay, so now we go to Nevada. Okay, where's Nevada at? I mean, Nevada has got plenty of problems. Okay, where's Nevada at? Nevada has only 6 seats, 97% reporting. Okay, the difference between 92% reporting, 49.9% of the votes has gone to Mr. Biden, 47.9% of the votes has gone to Mr. Trump. The difference is 30,569. The net difference is 30. It's legally being challenged because for a number of things. One, first claim is that a set of electoral rolls were sent by mail without proper verification and validation for the currency, that is, duplication, people who have passed away, people who are resident, current, etc. It appears close to 30,000 votes, postal ballots were sent without validation. All those ballots came back. In fact, someone said, even dead has voted for President Biden. So that's one kind of issue, right? The second, the Nevada has unique laws whereby people who are living outside the state within a specific, you are outside for less than 30 days, then you can still vote in Nevada. And those who have come in new can also vote in Nevada if you happen to be a student and so on and so forth. So there is a much more serious contentious issue around who are these types of people who have been allowed to vote. Okay, that's the second issue that is at stake in Nevada. The third issue that is at stake in Nevada is postal ballots which did not pass the due verification test, signatures matching, whether they had authentication, were all allowed to get through the system. And this is being challenged by Republican Party. So Nevada has got far more serious issues, notwithstanding the fact it has got only 6 seats and close to 92% of the voting. So this is definitely going into some kind of a resolution process in a legal context.
So let's get this thing clear. For someone to be able to vote in the United States, that person has to be a United States citizen. Never mind the fact that their ID is being checked or not checked. So there's a baseline requirement, which is that you have to be a US citizen. So now let's move on to the next state, sir, which is Georgia. What are your thoughts on Georgia?
Yeah, I think just to clarify one other nuance, each state has got this kind of rules, which is namely you can send by postal ballot, date state November 3rd. Somebody says that no, you have to receive the postal ballot on or before that day, 8 p.m. Somebody says that postal ballots, notwithstanding the fact it is date stamped, it has to be received 1 week prior. And some states basically say if you're from Army, you are allowed to receive up to 30 days after. So it's not a consistent rule that is applied as far as the postal. There is to some extent standardization, which is that November 3rd to be the kind of the deadline, right? The other thing is the state legislatures can change rules ratified by the state Supreme Court to accommodate those rules. Because in Pennsylvania, not in Nevada. In Pennsylvania, this has come into contention. Hey, you can't kind of keep changing rules that violates the constitutional validity of the national voting system. So, in addition to differences in the nuances, I gave the illustrative, rather than specifics. I don't want people to be very quoting me literally and figuratively. These are just illustrative in terms of the nuances and the differences in the state issues. But the story is that you also have that rules that are enacted to conduct the elections within the state. Those rules are the providence of the state legislature. You're not supposed to kind of keep changing the rules. That's what the Supreme Court kind of looks at. So you have these kind of variances, at play. So Nevada is at the epicenter of all these issues. Okay. Besides, I told you there's a fraud investigation underway in Las Vegas. So it's not a very trivial matter in United States in terms of the conduct of the elections, the rules for voting, and the methodology by which the ballots are validated. And then you also have the supervision process, which is whether enough representatives from both parties were present within the visible distance. So the ballot counting occurred in a transparent manner. It is around the transparency and the validity of the process, whether it was preserved. So you can't just have only Democrats or only Republicans, and it is always the local state officials, doesn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans, who actually do the conduct of this whole counting process. So I wanted to explain all those nuances within the context of the Nevada issue, because the same thing cascades down. Coming to Georgia, sorry.
No, go ahead, Georgia. I was going to remind you that we are on Georgia next. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Georgia is, I think it's going into recount because they have Georgia was contested, but it's going to go into a recount. So where's Georgia? So let me kind of, where are we in Georgia? Georgia is 49.5% to Biden, 49.3% to President Trump, and 10,195 votes is the difference, but it's a less than 1% margin. And there has been issues raised by President Trump, not only the electoral team, campaign team, but also by the legal. But anyway, it's going into recount, and mainly around verification process and validity process in certain districts within Georgia. That has been under contention. And they believe that some votes which belongs to President Trump has been transferred to Biden. This will all get fixed once the recount occurs. So that is Georgia.
Now,
and President Trump probably believes that he will win Georgia. Okay. So there's Georgia, there's North Carolina, there's Alaska, still kind of pending, roughly making up. Georgia is 16, North Carolina is 15, and Alaska is 3. Well, that's not 34 seats. President is at 214. So that'll take him to 248 seats if he wins all 3. Well, North Carolina looks very strong. Alaska, he looks pretty strong. If he wins Georgia, as per his kind of claim, then he's within striking distance, and he needs one more state to get through. So that's his position. That's why there is this huge legal contest.
So I'm going to keep Pennsylvania for last because there are some extra things that have been happening there. So let's just do that thing last. Let's now look at Arizona.
Okay, if you look at Arizona, Arizona is reporting 90%. Um, Biden is at 1,630,000 votes, and there's a net difference of 18,713 votes. The count is still on, right? And once President Trump was trailing by over 30,000 votes. Now he has kind of clawed his way back to about 18,000, and it's 90% reporting. So the counting is on. What is primarily the issue in Arizona? It could go into legal. The primary issue in Arizona is whether votes that belonged to President Trump has been incorrectly put in favor of Biden. Also, whether certain votes were incorrectly disqualified from being cast. These are two. In all these instances, the postal ballots come into play, right? So there's this contest around the postal ballots because of the highly unusual volume of the postal ballots that has been at play in these specific elections. In fact, it's record 96 million came in even before the day one of the elections on a total of about 147 million votes cast. So therefore, Arizona belongs to that. Arizona is interesting. Fox, which reported the result in favor of Mr. Biden, standing firm that its numbers are valid, and there is this. So therefore, it is very much. They don't expect, based on their models, the numbers to switch to President Trump, but President Trump is contesting that the election was announced premature. And there's also issues around the Arizona part of it, right? So that is being so whether it'll go into recount, we don't know. There's also data that basically states there's some chunk of population might move from California to Arizona, and whether those were properly factored in. And most of the Californian Democrats, as you know, Mr. Sree Iyer, that they tend to be liberal and favor the Democratic candidates, right? So therefore, it's possible that the uptick in the votes is due to those numbers, but not significant, not 30, 40,000 numbers. Maybe 2, 3, 4, 5,000 could be the result. So, but President Trump team firmly believes Arizona is theirs once the recounting and the proper validation of the postal ballots and the proper assessment of any votes that were declined is factored in.
Because of the fact that the window for submitting your vote was as wide as 30 days or even some places more than that, all these things have now started coming out, and it remains to be seen how things play out. So I think I want our viewers to understand this has never been an election. There has never been an election like this before, where you had 2/3 of the electorate casting their votes either postally or through mail, and some of us, like for example myself, I voted early and I went to the local library. There was an election official there. That person checked everything, and then they accepted my vote, which was very similar to what I would have done if I had gone on polling day, because I got to put it in the box. That box was being taken away every day, and that was being kept in a safe place. So this was how it played out in California. However, if somebody is adventurous, somebody wants to do something different, they could have done that. Now, the next state that we would like to look at, sir, is North Carolina. Please.
North Carolina, thus far, there are no issues that has been reported from North Carolina. The election process seems to be moving seamlessly. It is a matter of the votes, the delay in the postal votes being received. They have enough kind of cutoff date. I think it's 10 days is the cutoff date. So, they're almost pretty close to, making an announcement. But they're very cautious. They don't want to give on the past. Look, 99% reporting. Okay, 99% reporting, and President Trump has a margin of 75,000 votes plus. Okay, so I don't know whether Democrats would contest, but when I look at the percentages, it's pretty close to 3%. 48.7% to Mr. Biden, 50.1% to President Trump. That's 2.4% kind of a margin. Usually, when you have 2.5, 3% margin, unless there's serious maleficence, you're not going to see, a recount or something. At least there's no contest in North Carolina. Okay.
Now, the big one, which is Pennsylvania, 22 seats. Fox called that for Joe Biden, and which is why I think yesterday there was there was a speech by Biden and Kamala Harris. Now, let us take a look at Pennsylvania, because this is the one instance where the state Supreme Court stepped in and pass some orders. So let's go back a little bit in time, sir, on Pennsylvania and recap all the things that have been happening there. One of the things that viewers must remember is the way the counting happened on November 3rd. In some states, they counted the ones that were cast in the polling stations first, and then they took up manual counting. In other states, they did the reverse. Okay, so this is where, it looked like Trump was leading, and then he started losing ground, because those states that took up the manual count after the electronic count, that's where things started going a little bit awry. So I just want to keep the perspective, this is what really happened. There's nothing wrong in which sequence that they had to use. Whatever it is, that's what ended up happening. And now we have a very interesting situation in Pennsylvania. How are things in Pennsylvania, sir?
So I just want to add one caveat, right? The caveat is there's been a number of allegations that were made, like 120,000 votes in Michigan was, instead of this, it was set to this. Instead of President Trump, it was set. Overnight, when we went to sleep, some votes were changed from President Trump to Vice President Biden. I'm excluding making any observations or comments, because then you are validating an allegation as an issue for resolution. If it is, so therefore I'm avoiding these kinds of points which seems to permeate, and quite a few of them gets dismissed very rapidly, right? Because there's lack of evidence. The evidential process, this is another thing before we go to Pennsylvania, the evidential process will only begin from next week. So right now it is either allegations or affidavits which have been filed by specific officials who were asked to do a task, but who are also asked to be contravenous in executing. For example, cutoff date is November 3rd, okay? So therefore you allow the votes to, this is beyond November 3rd, accept it and pass it, right? Gets into the system. Number two, people are asked to mark with felt pens, and when they mark with the sharp tip pens, when those symbols disappeared, they were not allowed to what we call as the manual override procedure. So you are supposed to allow to correct and then put in. That's not allowed. These are all several complaints of the Republican Party, not much from the Democrats, right? Then the third, which is to say, if there was a mistake and the machine did not accept your ballot, you are mandated to give the ballot back and correct it and represent it to the machine to be accepted. They were not given the choice. So these are some of the issues across all these different places. These have come up, right? So I'm not suggesting these are right or wrong. This will be proven as the evidential process. Once we have evidence, then we can report in our daily calls, this is exactly what has happened. Right now, they remain an allegation and rather than evidential kind of fact. Okay, people saying this. Okay, now we go to Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania has, first and foremost, issues surrounding, as you rightly said, which gets counted first, which gets counted later. The second, the issue is they changed the rule that they can allow beyond a specific, allow the votes to come in, date stamped and posted on the same day, November 3rd. So, which means it can push the whole thing by a week to 10 days. Then, this is the one which has been taken up by the Supreme Court for in only one instance where Supreme Court has come in. Sam Alito has stated,
This is the federal
hey,
Supreme Court.
the federal Supreme Court has come in, and all the votes that came in after 8 p.m. on November 3rd should be set aside and counted separately, and the rest of the votes to be counted separately. Now, how they're going to delineate this thing is an interesting point. This is the first instance that has come in, because this rule change seems to have occurred very late. So therefore, what the Supreme Court is saying may determine is you can't kind of change rules of conduct of the elections on the fly, right? You have to follow certain kind of guiding principles in terms of doing it. Okay. Obviously, needless to say that our Pennsylvania legislature would probably contest it, and what happens to it remains to be seen, right? Then there's a series of issues that are propped up. On the election day, the Republican officials were not allowed at all. There's videos which shows people kind of fighting with the election officials, say, I want to get in. Then the Republican Party went and got a judgment passed that they should be. With some delays, they allowed them in. When they were allowed in, they were 150 feet away from the booths. So what they're saying is we are so distant and there are steel barricades, we don't know what the hell is happening on the other side when the counting goes on. So both on the transparency of the process as well as the underlying mandated rule of being an objective independent from the opposite side, if you have Democrats, why Republican is not allowed. This is still under contention, notwithstanding the Supreme Court passing the rule. So that's number two. I think the number three, I've already mentioned that this happened on the election day, that manual overrides were not allowed. This is something that is going to be contested next week, but a sizable number. Michigan and Pennsylvania, since we are talking Pennsylvania, these are two states which has apparently have had unusual. So president is leading. And then suddenly when you come in the morning, his lead is cut short by 50,000 or 100,000 or 120,000. Where did these votes come from? Because there was no objective observer sitting in the area. It's impossible for them to quantify. Now, when they interview the polling booth officials, they say such frauds cannot occur and this is valid. Okay? And they also, they got a ruling. This is the Republican Party got a ruling to stop counting, but they continued to count. Okay? They continued to count. So, because there was no independent observer, there was no Republican observer that they said you should stop the counting until the observer comes in. They did. Then we have these manual override issues in polling booths. Then we have issues around the validity of the ballots in terms of whether they were compliant in terms of all the completeness and the authentication tests. Then there's the issues around the date, which Supreme Court has intervened. So Pennsylvania has got a range of issues on the process, on the transparency of it, the change of rules, the timing, and this phantom votes which seems to have been added, right? This is because otherwise, president who was leading by 700,000 votes is actually trailing now by 31,000 votes, I think. Yeah, it's trailing by Pennsylvania. It's trailing by 41,000 votes. It's trailing by 41,000 votes. So, in my view, the order of the legal issues, I think Pennsylvania will kind of top the list. Not too far from that would be Wisconsin and Michigan. And and then will be Arizona. Sorry, Nevada. Then will be Nevada, and then will be Arizona. So Pennsylvania, um, Michigan, and Wisconsin. The reason why the complexity of issues is much more pronounced in Nevada. Nevada is six seats. Between Michigan and Wisconsin, we are talking about close to 26 seats at play, and the differences, at least in Wisconsin, is very, very narrow. The difference is very narrow. It's 0.3, 0.4%. Could be material in terms. So there may be detailed investigations on fraud in Michigan and Nevada, and there will be issues around the transparency of the process and the validity of the ballots and the incorrect process that was used to disqualify some of the ballots, all are going to come into question when we look at this, 6 states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Arizona. I'm leaving out Georgia. Georgia is accepted, so they're going to revoting.
Yes, indeed. So as a general rule, can we say that any result which is within 1% will automatically go into a recount?
Qualify for recount.
Yes.
Automatically qualify for recount.
Okay. So that is the other thing, that there will be a recount. Now, in the recount, I think it is mandated that both party representatives be present and that any contested vote, both have to agree one way or the other. I mean, they have to say this is valid or this is not valid. This is how it happens in India also. And we have the same kind of thing that is going to happen in the United States counting also. So there is still some more time left to definitively state that this is the winner and this is the loser. I think we just need to be patient. The process is systematic, it's methodical, and I also believe that some of these things will be challenged in lower courts, and then it will find its way up to the federal Supreme Court, and that has to be addressed in that sequence. So we have to see how this plays out. However, it is not the ruling between the lower and the higher court in the United States happens very quickly, within 24 hours sometimes, because when the thing goes to the higher court, there would have to be compelling evidence to overturn the lower court ruling, which is how judiciary works, by the way. So there is still a fair amount of churn that is left in this election. It is unprecedented. Remember that the United States never had so many votes cast in postal as well as mail-in votes. Also, I didn't even mention a couple of other variations. There is something called provisional ballot. I'm not going into that one. There's also duplicate ballot. Supposing somebody was registered at particular address and then 6 months before the election they move to another address and they apply from there also. Somewhere you have to reconcile. If they happen to cast their vote on both these ballots, only one has to count. So there is all sorts of things still left. I have not mentioned these things because these tend to be very, very small. It is not in the same level as the bigger challenges that are facing the nation here. So we're kind of looked at the yeah. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Sree. I also don't want to lose track. Just not lose in the. There is a specific process. These election results are not official. Let's be very clear. Unless and until it is certified by the Secretary of the State, the results are not official. So what we are seeing is, projected wins, and on the basis of projected wins by channels and so on, based on the numbers that you see. When a state has to officially declare and certify, we have validated and we have done it, and here's the signature, and therefore this person is declared winner, and then it is deemed as final unless it is legally contested. So that process is expected they've got long leeway, they can complete it by November 30th. Then the next process, they all have to send these results to House and Senate by December 14th. By December 14th is when they receive it, and both the House and the Senate says, we accept the results as has been communicated from various states and deemed passed. So we now have a House majority and House votes that comes into effect on January 20th. Oh, sorry, that comes into effect immediately, and then you have the Senate coming into effect. Then what happens is incoming president meets with the current president, and shakes hands and works out a transition plan and agree to work together on all decisions from December 14th to January 20th, when the new president gets sworn in. So this is the further step of the process that needs to be completed. So if Mr. Trump has to change the tide, he has to change the tide before December 14th. After December 14th, it's done.
Thank you so much for clarifying that part. And so there's a few more weeks to go, a few more weeks of suspense as this thing seesaws back and forth. In terms of the media coverage of this election, it has been very, very media plus social media and so on. We are including all these things. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, let us, for now, let's keep PGurus aside for a moment. We have tried to be objective, and let us, talk about the general media and the bigger players like the social media players.
See, my overarching observation in any of these matters is I've seen some of the observations that's posted even in PGurus, right? I've seen the observations in other groups. I don't know why people do not use data as a means to form their discussions, okay? Because you expect, data to be the basis to form. So what are the things that my observations, I'm just saying to you, every poll has proven to be wrong. Every poll has proven to be wrong. Number one. Number two, either they knew it or they didn't. They did not recognize that close to 100 million votes is going to come by postal ballots. 100 million. Either the pollsters are abysmal or they chose not to state that information to the public. Okay, 100 million. Number two. Number three, now this is very clearly Republicans strongly feel the media is against the president and the media is against the party. So the whole system was against President Trump. This is the Republican view. So every poll, today they were playing it out in the television, is up by 10 points, is up by 12 points, is up by 14 points. It's done. There's a blue wave. There's going to be a sweep of the elections. So it begs the question whether the social media ecosystem and the media ecosystem was quite intent on influencing with these types of polls that were being thrown around with no accountability. I mean, zero accountability under the whole construct of objectivity and transparency and independence of journalism and media to communicate. But if you are consistently so blatantly wrong, are you really objective is the question that raises. The only one person who was brought to this notice, and now slowly you may see, that's Tucker Carlson. Tucker has basically stated, look, I'm a conservative, you're a liberal. We agree our policies are different. We agree our principles are different. But we are talking to the same public. So since we are talking to the same public, is it not upon us to transparently communicate correct information? Otherwise, why we have these polls? If you are so wrong. The same thing happened in 2016. The polls were abysmally wrong. 2020, again abysmally wrong, right, in terms of the numbers. So we can go around the whole kind of ethos, but they're so badly kind of managed. So that is my kind of observation around the whole media and the social media ecosystem, which seems to be moving more and more and more aggressive and activist towards one side or the other side, right? So objectivity is gone, right? We only have to glean through the data and make a decision. Even believe me, when the markets went up, when there was doubts around President Trump getting a clear majority and Biden in the process of regaining majority, the betting switched from 60% to 80%. And I was in an interview in another TV panel. So I was asked the question, oh, look, markets love Biden. The betting is 80%. Today, the Dow is up 500 points. What do you think? Everybody loves Biden. When you talk to the market sentiment says that the results, the Dow and the S&P going up has to do with the Republican majority in the Senate and holding two important elements in check. One is rolling back the tax regime, and number two, increased regulation being thrust into the system, which adds to the cost, especially in a pandemic, right? So those were the two drivers they felt the market. Stimulus is given. Without stimulus, the markets will not go up. The Fed, around the same time, agreed to maintain a market friendly fiscal policy, monetary policy. So the story is when you look at those three variables, the markets went up. Again, the media, both the broadcast channels and print media, got this story topsy-turvy. So you have a whole set of data that is being floated around, which borders on the line of irresponsibility or activism. So what role media will play in the next 12 to 18 months? Those who don't follow the objective patterns, is a bigger question, right? And as we just discussed for the past 45 minutes, there's a lot of issues at play before somebody, even the announcing of um, the result, right? There seems to be a tremendous anxiety. Why there's a tremendous? I got so many readers. I was the first to announce. I'm the top of the pile. Whatever may be the reason, this is about a nation, and this is about people. And especially in the past 4 months, we have had a number of issues in the United States in terms of, violence and so on. It was even stated that if the elections kind of go this way, that way, we could see some, activities in certain urban metropolitan cities. And so many people kind of even, boarded their shops and, those who have houses and offices and et cetera were boarded, right? Including in New York, Washington, D.C., and Seattle and San Francisco and Chicago and so on. So there is a much broader responsibility for the media to be much more, thoughtful in their what they share and what they communicate, notwithstanding their very clear political aspirations. So that would be my overall observation.
So this brings us to the final topic of our discussion today. Looking forward, are electoral reforms needed? If yes, what kind of reforms would you like to see, sir?
Um, Clearly, electoral reforms are needed as we kind of move forward, where there should be some element. We are now well into the 21st century. We are now into one of the most sophisticated digital nations in the world. United States is the driver and enabler of innovation. It has to demonstrate to the world it has an electoral system that is rigorous, that passes the stress tests, and gives a very simple process to authenticate every voter. Doesn't matter where he's located, authenticate the voter, whether it is through voter ID, whether it is through some other mechanism, that you need an authentication framework by which this is digitally enabled without the lumbersome process of mailing and ballots and so on as we look ahead and go into the next elections. Plus, of course, depending on the digital electronic voting mechanisms, the rules associated with conduct of the elections, the process for validating the outcome, which comes from the counting, must also be appropriately changed, and a law enacted that is agreed to and passed across the nation, not just state by state. State can have little nuances, but there has to be, one single consistent kind of a framework, accepting the fact that there are differences in, some of the state nuances. So everybody is crying for a reform that is much, much needed. Second, this particular election, has made United States look very small in the eyes of the world in terms of we are now 1 week into the elections. We still don't know that there is a clear cut winner. What we have is a decisive winner right now as things stand by numbers. But you have the existing president contesting, which is to say, no, I'm not prepared to concede this election has been stolen from me, etc., etc. One can say, hey, I don't like with you, I don't like you, I don't agree with you, and all those kinds of things. But the fact is that nobody can say he's wrong, and nobody can say this is kind of explicitly right. Therein lies the problem in terms of where United States is, just from an optics and the whole electoral process.
Well, with that, we bring this special 1 hour hangout to a close. It took us about 50 plus minutes. We have a few questions, but I'm not sure these are, going to help in any way discuss or add to what we have already had. We wanted to tell our viewers the complete picture of where things stand in all the races in United States, all the nuances and how things will play out. I believe we have done that. Viewers, please subscribe to our channel and also donate to our channel. And as always, Sridharji, thank you very much for joining this special hangout. And we will be back tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time with our 15-minute news capsule. Namaskar. Thank you very much.
Namaskar, and thank you. Have a wonderful Sunday.